quite unusual. Although they went through the same thing with the Dreamliner with the batteries. You may remember there was an Ethiopian and a Japanese 787 Dreamliner that had a battery problem. The FAA grounded the airplane.
But did they crash?
That took
Were those,
years.
Alan, I do remember that incident, but which was more complicated in a way in terms of the systems involved.
Oh, yeah.
But we're talking about over 300 deaths in 5 months.
Yeah, this is a different situation, and as Phil just pointed out, they've got the black boxes. I think it'll be more like a week or two before we know the answers, but they should be able to read that data very quickly to establish whether or not there's a similarity between the Ethiopian and the Indonesian 737 MAX crash. If there is, I suspect you'll see the aircraft grounded temporarily, but the fixes are not nearly as complicated as they were on the Dreamliner, the 787, where they had to redo the battery box. A lot of mechanical fixes.
Yeah,
They're talking about training and software here on the 737 MAX.
What I find interesting about that, though, and again, to make sure people hear what you're saying this fix is not as complicated as the fix for the battery issue in the 787 Dreamliner. But Alan, if this is a simple fix that was responsible for another plane's downing, and we'll see, again, we're speculating here, but if it's that simple, why wasn't it done? Or are we just assuming that the fix really is that simple? And if it's a fix, is it something that American and Southwest and everyone else flying these planes is confident that they're taken care of?
Clearly, Kelly, in hindsight, Boeing should have done a better job of informing the customers, the airlines, that they might want to think about, or they should think about additional training. Brazil was the only country that demanded additional training for their pilots if they're going to fly the MAX aircraft, the 737 MAX. So anyway, yeah, hindsight's 2020. The FAA gave Boeing a pass on this. They looked at the data and thought it could be flown safely. But Kelly, with these automated aircraft, a lot of times when things go wrong, they go wrong very quickly. Now, the fact that all pilots flying the MAX 8 now know about the potential danger. We don't know about Ethiopian yet, but the solution is quite simple. You take your hands off the throttle and you throw two switches right next to the throttle. So, if you're about to board a MAX aircraft, I don't think I would run down the ramp and demand to be deplaned. The pilots are probably aware of this, but certainly Boeing and the FAA need to address this long-term, whether or not this latest event was caused by the automation.
The fact that this happened first with a Lion Air flight, then with an Ethiopian Air flight, I think there are some Americans who wonder if we can assume that the U.S. training is better, or somehow if that's the reason why nothing like this has happened in this country. But from what I read about the pilots involved in the Ethiopian flight, they're very trained. This is an airline that had an extremely good reputation overseas. So, this is not necessarily, someone who's flouting safety regulations, and you'd assume that they're not up to speed on what's happening here. If they seem to be extremely diligent.
Yeah, Ethiopian has a very good reputation for both maintenance and training. Lion Air, not quite so much, especially on the maintenance end. Both of these airlines are expanding, but with Ethiopian, it seems to have been a much more methodical expansion. Of course, this is owned by the Ethiopian government, this airline. So they're willing to throw money because they want to be they want to be the primary carrier airline in Central Africa. So I don't know that we'll find a training problem or a maintenance problem with Ethiopian here, although I should say the last time they lost a 737 in 2010, the Ethiopians were criticized for not providing crew coordination training to their pilots. So we'll have to wait and see. That's what air safety investigators do. They'll be very meticulous, but they need to get the word out very quickly after reading these black boxes.
So, Alan, you said, and I just want to make everybody clear on this before we go, you said people shouldn't be running down the ramp trying to get off the plane if they realize they're on a 737 MAX 8 or they're booked on one. You think as things stand today, right now, everybody boarding one of these aircraft is safe? There's nothing about the aircraft itself and the systems that they should be concerned about?
If I were going to fly it, or one of my relatives were, I would tell them, see if you can't get on a different flight. If it's the only flight going to Peoria and Aunt Molly is sick and you really need to get there and the max is the only way to go, get on the airplane. It's it's very unlikely.
That's not exactly a ringing
endorsement.
One. Yeah.
Yeah, but if you can fly a different type of different model, easily change your flight. Otherwise, I would I wouldn't stay awake all night worrying about it. But I do think the government and Boeing needs to take serious action about getting a software fix and making sure these pilots are trained. Once you practice this in the simulator, it becomes almost automatic.
Okay.
But you still need to practice it. I think they need to require training, kind of like the Brazilian authorities did for their pilots.